Hello everybody, and welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the 2022 Senate elections and my second to final prediction for these. I know it's crazy. We've been doing these for, a year and a half now? I think the first of these I ever made was in February 2021, so we've been on this episode of unbiased election predictions for a while, but this is our second to final Senate prediction for the 2022 midterms. Don't get emotional. Please don't start crying. But yeah, we're about here. We have, obviously, I'll do one the day of, on November 8th, I'll release one. But yeah, this is our second to final one. So there's a lot to cover. We've got a lot of things that I think are new that should be talked about here. So let's just get right into it. Obviously, subscribe if you haven't already, like the video, comment down below your prediction, and let's just get into it here. So, our safe Democratic states, these are Oregon, California, Hawaii, Illinois, Maryland, New York, Connecticut, and Vermont. That puts the Democrats at 44 seats. I don't really think any of these are too controversial. There may be some seats you want to see here that are not here, but I think we should all agree these are pretty consensus safe Democratic seats. Now, for our safe Republican seats, we've got a few of those as well. Idaho, the Dakotas, Kansas, Oklahoma. Alaska is going to be safe Republican too with Chewbacca and Murkowski. The only question is which Republican wins, which I will not be covering today. I'll be covering my final Senate prediction. Arkansas, Missouri. Actually, we don't have to touch Missouri just yet. Kentucky, Indiana, Louisiana, Alabama, and South Carolina. So there are two states to be adding here, which are Utah and Missouri. And these are only worth talking about because I think that there's like a debate about them. So Utah right now is a race between Republican incumbent Mike Lee and an independent challenger Evan McMullin, who did run for president in 2016. And for those of you who don't know, McMullin basically ran as just an anti-Trump conservative, and he was only really competitive in Utah, and he basically only ran for president of Utah. It's like really only where he ran ads or campaigned even. And he got, a little under 22% of the vote here. So it was a, very solid showing for a third-party candidate. So, he has a base in Utah for sure. I think there are a lot of people in Utah who do like him, and I think that's worth noting. But, most Republicans still broke for Trump, and all he really did here was kind of split because, I don't really think he was a vote splitter from anyone, because, the hope for Clinton was that McMullin would take away enough votes from Trump to, get her, a really goofy victory in Utah, but she didn't get enough votes in the first place. And also McMullin, what you would expect from Utah would be, if you split his vote 11% for Trump, 10% for Clinton, it would have been a 55 to 38 or 37 type victory there. And then the remaining third parties like Gary Johnson, whatnot, would have, taken the rest. So unsurprising here that McMullin, he didn't really do too well, and he actually took, I think, a fairly equal amount of votes away from both candidates. But, he has a base here, and that's, I think, the point I'm trying to convey. But is it enough to get within 15 points of beating Mike Lee in an ultra-red state? Probably not, especially in a midterm like this. And, Trump didn't do quite well in Utah in 2020. He lost. He won it by about 20 points, which is still a lot, but, he underperformed Romney, Lee, and Cox. But down ballot, he does a lot more Republican. That's what's going to get Lee to a, kind of a 60-40 type victory here. Then Missouri had an interesting primary on the Republican side. A lot of candidates ran. Eric Schmidt, the Attorney General, won, and he's fairly popular. And Rudy Bush Valentine's a very average Democratic candidate, doesn't really excite anyone. Democrats haven't really invested in the race, so I mean, there's a chance it comes within 15, but I don't think it's worth talking about here. So let's move on to our likely Democratic states. I see two of these, Washington and Colorado. So Washington is a state where the polls have been kind of close. I haven't done an aggregate for it because I don't think it's important enough, but Patty Murray has been leading Tiffany Smiley by high single digits, low double digits in the polls, and I think this is one of the races where I think the polls could actually underestimate Democratic support. Now, I think it's kind of a toss-up if it actually does happen or not, but just for the sake of being cautious here, I think I'm going to put it as likely. I don't really think Tiffany Smiley has any chance of winning, but she will, I think she will most definitely, do better than Trump. And I think she'll become within 15, which is why it's in the likely column. Now, Colorado, I actually do have a polling aggregate for. And again, for those of you who don't know, this is my polling average. I'm doing it for governor's races too, as you can see. I also show my 2020 results for transparency. If you look at my final 2020 prediction using this model, this is not my actual prediction, but it is my final, or this is what the model prediction would have been based on this. Again, it was pretty accurate. The only state missed is North Carolina, but even then, it only had it being a 0.3% victory for Biden. So decently good model, I'd say, or polling aggregate, if you would. And again, this is not my final prediction. My final prediction had both Georgia and North Carolina going red instead of blue. But either way, I've got some governor's races I'm putting in here, got some Senate races too. But Colorado, let's see what this is. So 538 has Bennett up by 8.8. I've got him up by 6.5. I think he wins by a little more. Polls tend to underestimate Democrats in Colorado. We even saw that in 2020, despite the polling miss basically everywhere else going against that. And ultimately, Bennett's a decent incumbent. He won in 2010, which was a red wave. He won in 2016, which was a bit of a more neutral year. And, Joe Day's a good candidate. I think he'll do pretty well in the Denver suburbs, but the Republicans don't have like any contested statewide races. They don't really have any rural seats that are competitive, so I don't think rural turnout will be up enough to get like O'Day close to beating Bennett. So yeah, those are our likely D seats. Now, likely R seats. The first is Iowa. We're just going to go kind of across the Midwest here with these states. So Iowa is Iowa's interesting. So we came into this election expecting Chuck Grassley to win easily because in 2016 he beat Patty Judge by like 26 points or 24 points rather, and he won all but one county. And so we were expecting, a similar electoral performance. But the thing is, he's 89 years old, and in the polls we've been seeing, he's been getting punished for his age. A lot of voters don't like him because think he's too old. And unlike Patty Judge, his opponent, Mike Franken's actually running like a decent campaign. He isn't like a star recruiter or anything, but he's actually had like a decent ground game. And I also think most importantly, polarization catches up here, and there were a lot of Democrats who just liked Chuck Grassley and voted for him. And I think with, in an election like this, where there's so much polarization, I think it's going to be hard for Grassley. So he'll still win. I think he'll win by like 13 or 14, but the polls fight it pretty close, and I think polarization will be enough to drag it below 15. Wisconsin, I'm moving it from lean R to likely R. Look, right now, the polls in Wisconsin on my aggregate show a lead for Mandela Barnes of about 3.1%. Now, I have not yet put in the CNN poll, which was Johnson +1. Again, adjusted for 2020 year, I don't think it'd be that much. Maybe Barnes would lose 0.2 or 0.3% in the polls. Doesn't really matter. He's down by over 3%. And, when you're down as a Democrat by over 3% in Wisconsin, it is really bad for you. Biden was up by he was up by nearly 8.5 on election day in 2020. You know how much he won by? 0.6. Apply that same polling myth. This race is basically just safe Republican. Now, I don't think we're going to see a double-digit victory for Ron John in the making here. But Mandela Barnes is a bad candidate. We know this. He's not going to be doing very, very well in Milwaukee. He's not going to be doing, I think anything special with working class voters, or most certainly not voters in the Wild counties who seem to really like Ron Johnson. And so, putting all that together, I think you're going to see a 5-point victory for Ron John. I'd say maybe a little more than what happened in 2016. And, originally I thought the race would be kind of close, maybe like a 2 or 3 point victory for Ron John. But the thing is, as election day nears, he keeps outspending Barnes. The polls keep getting worse for Barnes, and he has a little momentum, and momentum's what really matters heading into election day. Now, Ohio, I think of these three states maybe has like the best chance of going blue. That isn't saying much because they're all likely are, and they're not actually like truly competitive. But, looking at the polls right now, I have JD Vance up by 3.3. And yes, that's still pretty bad for a Democrat in Ohio. But what it does do is it does create, like, if there's a poll miss in the opposite direction, my aggregate will like be, this should be updated. My aggregate will be, decently, too favorable to Republicans. And again, by the way, this aggregate throws out a lot of the terrible partisan polls that showed Ryan up by like 10 points, like the Center Street polls and his internal polls. I don't put in Democratic internals here because I think they're just kind of useless. And so, the fact that JD Vance, even with all these adjustments, is only up by 3.3 shows that Tim Ryan's like holding his own and he has a solid bastion of support. We've also seen some narrowing in polls that are nonpartisan, so I think that gives Ryan like a chance, a snowball's chance in hell, but like still not likely. It's a Trump-less state, and there are no third-party spoilers on the ballot to put an extra variable in the race. And so, that out of the way, JD Vance is going to win. Now, our next and final likely R state is Florida. Florida is a state where Marco Rubio is going to cruise to re-election. And, my aggregate only has him up by 4.5 points, as you can see right here. I don't know why that is. He's up by, I don't know why, but me and FiveThirtyEight actually agree on this one. He's up by 4.6. I think he'll win by double that. I think it'll be a 9-10 point victory for Rubio. The early vote looks atrocious for Democrats in Florida. Miami-Dade is likely going to flip. Val Demings has a base in Orlando, but outside of that, she's not super well known in Florida. And Rubio's a good incumbent. He'll win by 10%. It won't be close. Now, lean D states. The first one I'll be putting here is Georgia. Georgia is a state that I think Democrats should be pretty happy about. Now, if you look at my polling aggregate, it is showing a lead for Raphael Warnock of about 1.9%. I paused it because I want to throw in the ECU poll we got. Just double checked, we did get that. So, Georgia is looking really good for Raphael Warnock right now. And you know what time it is. It's that time of year to pull out the good old GeorgiaVotes.com. Again, this is a site where you can track early votes in Georgia. We're getting an update likely on Tuesday night. This is being filmed on Tuesday afternoon, so we're going to see where that gets us. I don't think it'll change the trajectory too much because it's, just a random Tuesday, but let's see here. So right now, as you can see, nearly 1 million Georgians, soon to be over 1 million, have voted in the 2020 general election. So good on Georgia for having high voter turnout. This is 55% higher than we saw at this point in 2018. And, that's like really high, obviously, because 2018 was already a high turnout midterm. But I think more importantly, what's interesting is that the 2018 early vote was like, all right, for Democrats in Georgia, it put them in a competitive spot, didn't put them favored or anything. But the thing here is that, what matters in Georgia early vote and like what matters in analyzing it is congressional district breakdown and racial breakdown. And right now, Black voters make up 32.1% of the electorate. Do you know what percent they made up in 2020? 29%. That is a 3% spike in Black turnout from 2020 when Biden won Georgia. And as we know, Black voters were 94% for Warnock. So, more Black voters are voting is very good for Warnock. Now, that's going to go down as we approach Election Day, but I don't think it'll go down by enough to get it to a 2020 margin because, again, the threshold for Georgia Democrats is generally get to 30% of the Black vote. They're at 32.1%, and maybe they lose a point on Election Day, but they'd still be, over that. And on the day of the Georgia runoffs, it was at 30.6 or 7%. So they're running a point and a half ahead of, the day they won the Georgia runoffs, both Ossoff and Warnock. And so that's obviously tracking very good for them. I think that's something that they should be very, very happy about. But additionally, let's look at congressional district. And again, this is the congressional district ranked by what percentage compared to 2018 they turned in their ballots. The one with the highest percentage is Georgia 13. They're already out voting 2018. Already out voting 2018. And so, as you can see right here, Georgia 13, this is a blue district. This is, and I'll just show you on the map. The seats that are turning in their ballots most are Democratic. This is the 2020 map that's 2016, 2020. Let's put on 2020 president, or if you want to do 2021 runoff, we can do that too in a second. But look, doesn't really change much. District 13, highest return rate. That is a deep blue district. Let's see what the second highest is. That's going to be 94%, I think. That's Georgia 9, which again is a Republican district. So Georgia 9 is right there. But if you look at the other ones, that's a bit of an outlier. Georgia 11. Georgia 11. This is a seat that voted for Donald Trump. But as you can see right here, the areas that have turned in their ballots most are these blue areas. And if you look at the districts that are turning even higher than that, sorry, I missed one. Georgia 7. Georgia 7, this is Gwinnett County, also quite blue. Talk about Georgia 5 and Georgia 4. These are also very good for Democrats. Georgia 4, 87%. Georgia 5, 90.1%. Georgia 9 and Georgia 11 are like pretty good for Republicans, but they're kind of outmatched 4-2. And these states are going to these seats are going to need big turnout from Republicans on Election Day. And then if you look at the seats that have like lagging behind the most, 60.2% in Georgia 12. That is a seat that was overwhelmingly for Trump. And then what else do we have here? I think the second lowest is going to be 81%. Georgia 2. That's a Democratic seat, but again, this is the seat that turns out more on Election Day for Democrats because it's mostly rural Black voters that make up the Democratic share of the electorate. And then Marjorie Taylor Greene's seat, Georgia 14, looking decently good for Republicans, about the middle of the pack here. But again, the two seats that are crushing it in terms of turnout right now, Georgia 13 and Georgia 7. That's great news for Democrats, and I think Georgia 9 and Georgia, I think it's Georgia. There's another Georgia 9, Georgia 11 are pretty good for Republicans, but the Black share is pretty high. The two biggest seats are still Democratic seats, and that's very encouraging if you're Raphael Warnock. Now, that was a long Georgia tangent. I have a lot to say about Georgia. Let's do our next lean D state. That's New Hampshire. New Hampshire, I expect, and moving it down from likely D, and that's mostly because we've seen a bit tightening in the polls and Republicans reinvesting here. 538 has her up by 5.5%. I've got her up by 4.1%, which is about a 2-point shift since the last video. I think she'll win by under 5. I don't really think she's like at serious risk of losing, but I'd be, pretty surprised if it's over that 5-6% margin of victory, because at this point, it looks like Bullock's going to, hit his floor or, kind of have a higher floor that he'll be hitting. So, yeah, I don't think there's too much to say about this race, but it is getting a little bit closer. Bullock, I think, has maybe a 1 in 4 chance of winning. Now, final 4 states, these are going to be very interesting to look at. So we have one lean R state, and then I think the rest are kind of pure toss-ups here. The early vote in North Carolina doesn't really look that good for Democrats. Democrats are lagging a bit behind the 2020 numbers, and the share of the electorate that is black is 19%. And it was 20, I think NYT has it 23%, 2020, it's probably close to 21%. But the fact that Democrats are lagging behind an early vote for black voters is still really bad. So I think, it was always going to be an uphill climb. And I think, Beasley has a path, but there's no reason to believe she's favored right now. She has to do a lot to up black turnout in these final few weeks, and I don't think that it's possible, but I wouldn't bet on it, and I still keep it lean R, but I think it's at this point close to likely R than it is to toss up. Now let's look at our toss up races here. So I think the easiest for me to characterize right now is Arizona, which I think is going to vote for Mark Kelly, and the reason I'm moving it from lean D to tilt D is simple. Blake Masters is doing decently well in the polls right now. He was getting blown out pretty early on, but he's closed the gap, and right now he is down by 4.6%, 538 down by 4.4% in my poll, or in my aggregate. Sorry, not my poll. I don't conduct polls, unfortunately. But look, apply 2020 polling error, and he loses by a little over 2. So he'd still be losing, and he'd still be losing by outside the margin of error, but he's close. And I think that's what we're going to see. I think he's going to lose by about 2 points. I think Masters is going to do decently well with Hispanics, and he might get all right rural turnout, but his problem is that there are going to be a lot of Kelly voters in the suburbs, and in a state like Arizona, it can be hard to overcome, especially with turnout looking pretty good for Democrats early on. Although again, it's hard to interpret because Arizona, unlike Georgia or North Carolina, is a bit harder to read in terms of electorate demographics. So Arizona right now tilt D, but I think I still would expect Kelly to win. Now, final 2 states, these are going to determine it. And I think for the first time in a while, they're both going to go Republican. Yep, you heard it. Me, I'm saying it. I think both these states are going to go Republican. We'll start with Nevada. Nevada right now is interesting because my poll actually has her up by 0.6, has Cortez Masto by 0.6% over Laxalt, despite the fact that FiveThirtyEight has her up by 1. Now, do I think she's going to win by 0.6? It's possible. I wouldn't bet on it, though. And the reason that she's actually up right now is because this aggregate applies historical polling miss, which benefits Democrats in Nevada, in states like Nevada and Colorado, for example, and to a lesser extent Georgia, but it's mostly Nevada and Colorado. And so that does give Cortez Masto a boost in my aggregate. I don't think I think she's an underdog right now. So in terms of electability, Laxalt's done a good job of kind of distancing himself from abortion. He suffered less, or from GOP abortion policies. He suffered less of a post-Oz backlash than other Republican candidates have in other states like, Walker or Masters or Oz. But to me, I'm thinking that I'm thinking, I don't know. I'm thinking that Laxalt's going to do decently well in the Vegas suburbs. I'm thinking rural turnout will be good enough. And Sisolak's, I think Sisolak's going to lose by 2 or 3 points in the governor's race. And Cortez Masto, and that'll just be enough to drag Cortez Masto down with him, because Nevada's not a super big ticket splitty state. And I know, 2014 and 2010, but that was because the Democrats literally did not contest the governor's race when they're clearly doing so this time to defend their candidate. So I think we're going to see some interesting results out of Nevada for sure. Again, the early vote is super preliminary. We don't know what to take away from it. I think there are good signs for Democrats. I think there are good signs for Republicans, or at least ambiguously good signs for Republicans. But, let's just, the only person qualified to do super, predictive Nevada vote, early vote analysis is John Ralston. And, I'm not John Ralston, so I'm not going to do that yet. At least not until election day. When, generally like the weekend before the election, he kind of, gives us, who's going to win. He predicted Biden, he predicted Clinton, predicted Obama, predicted Harry Reid. Generally he's quite good at Nevada predictions. So we're just going to see what he says, and we're going to kind of interpret it our own way. Now, final state, Pennsylvania. This is a flip. So this gives Republicans the majority here. And what has changed, you might ask? Now, right now, the polls have gotten a lot tighter. Right now, John Fetterman is only up by 2.2%, FiveThirtyEight. He's only up by 4.2% in my aggregate. So you might be noticing there are 2 polls missing. There's a CNN poll missing. There's a YouGov poll missing. YouGov poll I chucked out because it was really bad in terms of crosstabs and undecideds, and it was really wonky. Again, that isn't to say I didn't I don't chuck out polls that I don't like the result of. Wick, for example, I think is a really bad Republican poll, but I kept them in, right? But look, Oz has the momentum, clearly. Fetterman still is a lead, and he's up by 4 points in my aggregate. but like he's leading by less than Biden was up by at this point. And like I know polling mists in Pennsylvania are like a lot smaller in midterms than in presidential elections, but I don't know. I just it's kind of a gut feeling as well. But like Fetterman did not perform well in the debate. He did not really have that good of a showing. Or I mean, like the early vote looks pretty good for Fetterman in fairness, but like the polls are narrowing. Oz is the momentum, and I think Oz like momentum matters a lot in politics, and I think it's pretty under discussed. And I think I would be kind of betraying my gut if I were to say I still think Fetterman wins. Now, this could move back to tilt D by election day. I think it's squarely in toss up right now, but this could this could move back to tilt D, all right. But like Fetterman, I think is kind of not imploding, but like he's not closing strong. Oz is closing a little stronger than he was closing in the summer or doing in the summer. And overall, I think the Republicans in Pennsylvania, they're going on they're going all in on Oz, and they've bought a ton of ad buys. He's outspending Fetterman, and I think at this point, I do think he's going to narrowly beat him. So that's it. Republicans get the majority here, 51-49. Updated prediction. So thank you for watching. Again, I know this is controversial. I know it's my last prediction of Democrats getting the majority, but this is, I think I just want to update you guys 2 weeks out. So here's what we are. Thank you for listening. Comment down below what you think. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you're not already. We've got 14 days, 14 until the midterms, 14 more days of videos per day. And so yeah, hit that notifications bell, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.